Chapter 1. The Invitation to Paradise. The little Belgian sat very upright in the first-class compartment of the Orient Express, his moustaches perfectly waxed, his shoes gleaming like black mirrors. A single green leather folder lay on the table before him. Inside was a single sheet of heavy cream paper, embossed with a golden trident. Hercule Poirot read the letter for the third time, his eyebrows rising millimetre by millimetre. My dear Monsieur Poirot, you are invited to the most exclusive auction of the century, to be held upon my private island of Serpente, off the coast of Sicily. Among the treasures to be offered is the fabled Emerald of Cleopatra, unseen for 2,000 years. Your presence would honour me beyond measure, and I confess I desire the pleasure of your company, and perhaps the protection of your incomparable mind. The world believes the emerald cursed. I prefer to believe it merely misunderstood. All expenses shall be mine. The yacht leaves Naples on the 15th. Your obedient servant, Sir Geoffrey Harrington Poirot, folded the letter with delicate precision. Curses, one does not invite Hercule Poirot merely to admire jewels. One invites him because one fears something, or someone. He allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. Adventure, luxury, and most delicious of all, mystery. It was irresistible. 3 days later, beneath a sky of molten copper, the white yacht Serpente's kiss cut through the Mediterranean like a blade. Poirot stood at the rail, coat-collar turned up against the salt wind, watching the island rise from the sea. A fortress of black rock crowned with a white villa that blazed in the sunset like a wedding cake set on fire. On the deck with him were the other guests gathered, each more flamboyant than the last. Lady Valentina de Rossi, once the most beautiful woman in Rome, now preserved by rage and diamonds, smoked a cigarette in a holder long enough to be a weapon. Count Nikolai Volkov, exiled Russian nobleman and professional gambler, drank champagne as though it were water and watched everyone with pale wolf's eyes. Miss Daphne Blair, 23, golden-haired and heiress to half of Yorkshire's coal, laughed too loudly at everything. Mr. Felix Goldsmith, the London art dealer, with the smile of a shark and the ethics of a pickpocket. And finally, Dr. Evelyn Hart, quiet, dark-eyed, and far too watchful for a woman who claimed to be merely Sir Geoffrey's private physician. Poirot observed them all, his gaze resting longest on their host. Sir Geoffrey Harrington stood at the prow, a giant of a man in white linen, beard like a Viking gold, laughing as he pointed out dolphins to Daphne Blair. 60 years old, twice bankrupt, 3 times richer again, collector of beauty in all its forms, art, women, danger. "Welcome, welcome," he roared as the yacht docked at the private jetty. Torches flared along the path that climbed to the villa. Tonight we feast, tomorrow we bid, and the day after, well, who knows? Perhaps one of us will own the most dangerous jewel in the world. Lady Valentina exhaled smoke through her nostrils. Or perhaps the jewel will own one of us, Geoffrey darling. Sir Geoffrey threw back his head and laughed, as though she had made the finest joke in Christendom. Poirot descended the gangplank last. The warm Sicilian night wrapped around him like velvet. Somewhere in the gardens, nightingales sang. Somewhere deeper, a gong sounded for dinner. He paused at the foot of the marble steps leading up to the villa and looked back once at the dark sea. The yacht's lights were already fading as it returned to the mainland. For the next 5 days, Serpente would be cut off from the world. No telephones, no escape. "Perfect," murmured Hercule Poirot, stroking his moustache with immense satisfaction. "The stage is set. Now we wait only for the curtain. and for murder. He turned and climbed towards the lights, his little patent leather shoes tapping a measured rhythm on the stone. The game, as he liked to say, had begun. Greetings, detectives and curious minds. It truly warms my heart to have you with me again this evening. I'd love to know where you're listening from and whether you had a peaceful day. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for a brand new mystery every night. Chapter 2. Arrival on the Isle of Secrets. The villa was a palace of white marble and madness. Moorish arches opened onto terraces that hung above the sea like the prows of ships. Fountains played in courtyards scented with jasmine and orange blossom. Everywhere, servants in black and gold livery moved silently, as though the house itself breathed through them. Poirot was shown to a suite overlooking the eastern cliff. A bowl of perfect peaches waited on the table. Beside it lay a single calling card. I shall call upon you at 7, mon ami. There are things you must know before the auction begins. G.H. At 7 precisely, Sir Geoffrey knocked and entered without waiting. He carried a crystal decanter of brandy and 2 glasses. You are admiring my little kingdom, Monsieur Poirot. I am admiring the perfection of its isolation, Poirot replied, accepting the glass. One could commit a dozen crimes here, and the world would remain ignorant until the yacht returned. Sir Geoffrey's laugh was softer this time. That is rather the point. But I did not bring you here for crime. I brought you here for insurance. He crossed to the balcony. The moon had risen, silvering the sea. The Emerald of Cleopatra, he said quietly, is worth a king's ransom. But more than that, it is a magnet for every species of human greed and folly. I have spent 20 years hunting it. Last month it came into my hands legally, irrevocably. Yet already 3 attempts have been made to steal it before it, twice in Cairo, once in Paris. The last thief left behind a note. Tishu, curse his patient. Poirot sipped the brandy. It was superb. And you fear the thief is among your guests. I fear the thief is cleverer than I am, Sir Geoffrey admitted. I want you to watch, to listen, to tell me whom I should fear. Poirot set down his glass. You wish Hercule Poirot to act as bodyguard to a stone. I wish him to prevent a tragedy. Because if someone tries again and succeeds, someone else will certainly die. People have killed for less than that emerald, my friend, much less. A gong sounded in the distance. Dinner. Sir Geoffrey drained his glass. Come, let us go down to the circus. The dining saloon glittered like the inside of a jewel box. A table of black glass reflected 100 candles. The guests were already seated when Poirot and Sir Geoffrey entered. Conversation stopped for a heartbeat, then resumed louder, as though someone had turned up the volume on a wireless set. Lady Valentina wore scarlet tonight. The rubies at her throat looked wet. Count Volkov's white tie was fastened with a black pearl the size of a musket ball. Miss Blair sparkled in something silver and almost transparent. Only Dr. Hart remained sober in charcoal silk, her sole ornament a thin gold chain that disappeared into her bodice. Sir Geoffrey took his place at the head. Poirot was given the chair to his right. Opposite sat Lady Valentina, who regarded him with the lazy amusement of a cat watching a new mouse. "Tell me, Monsieur Poirot," she purred, "do you believe in curses?" "I believe in motives, madame. Curses are what the unimaginative blame when motive is too ugly to face." Count Volkov raised his glass. "To motives, then. May they remain hidden long enough for us to finish the fish." The first course was served. Tiny quails stuffed with foie gras, glistening like jewels themselves. Halfway through the meal, the lights dimmed and 2 footmen wheeled in a pedestal draped in black velvet. Sir Geoffrey rose. "My friends, before the suite, allow me a moment of theatre." He lifted the cloth. On the pedestal rested a casket of rock crystal. Inside, on a bed of midnight silk, lay the emerald of Cleopatra. Even by candlelight it burned. A green fire so deep it seemed to have no surface, only depth upon depth, drawing the eye inward until the soul felt dizzy. It was the size of a pigeon's egg, carved into the shape of a coiled serpent devouring its own tail. A sigh rippled around the table. "Magnificent!" whispered Felix Goldsmith, licking his lips like a starving man. "Terrifying," said Dr. Hart, so softly that only Poirot heard. Sir Geoffrey smiled. "Tomorrow evening it will be auctioned in the Great Hall. Bidding begins at £1,000,000. Until then, it remains in my private vault, guarded night and day. Sleep well, my friends. Dream of empires." The lights brightened. The emerald vanished beneath its cloth and was wheeled away. Conversation exploded. Only Daphne Blair seemed untouched by the display. She was staring at Count Volkoff with the helpless fascination of a rabbit watching a stoat. Poirot noted everything. Later, on the terrace, while the others drank coffee and liqueurs under the stars, he stood alone at the balustrade. The sea hissed against the rocks far below. Behind him, silk rustled. Dr. Evelyn Hart appeared at his elbow. "You saw their faces when the emerald was shown," she said without preamble. "I saw many things, mademoiselle." "Then you saw fear, not greed fear. Sir Geoffrey thinks someone wants to steal the stone. He is wrong. Someone wants to destroy it, and everyone who touches it." She turned to go. "Why do you tell me this?" Poirot asked. "Because I am tired of burying the dead," she said, and walked away into the darkness. Poirot remained on the terrace a long time, stroking his moustaches. Somewhere in the villa, a clock struck midnight. The nightingales had stopped singing. Chapter 3. The Auction's Glittering Allure. Morning on San Serpente was a shameless seduction of light. Sunlight poured through the Moorish arches, turned the marble floors to milk, and set the sea beyond the terraces ablaze with turquoise and gold. Breakfast was served on the upper loggia. Silver dishes of figs, honey still in the comb, coffee thick as velvet. Poirot took only a single peach and a cup of black coffee. He was watching the theatre of human behaviour unfold. Lady Valentina appeared late, wrapped in something diaphanous and emerald green that made her look like a venomous butterfly. She ignored the food and demanded a Bloody Mary strong enough to wake the dead. Count Volkoff, already on his second glass of champagne, was teaching Daphne Blair how to gamble away imaginary millions at baccarat. The girl's laughter rang like breaking glass. Felix Goldsmith prowled the edges of the group, notebook in hand, murmuring prices to himself. Only Dr. Hart was absent. Sir Geoffrey clapped his hands at 10 o'clock. "My friends, the auction catalogue is ready, but first, a small diversion. I have arranged a treasure hunt across the island. Clues hidden in the ruins of the old Phoenician temple, the lemon groves, the grottos. The prize? A private viewing of the emerald tonight, alone, before anyone else." A ripple of excitement. "Teams of 2, Sir Geoffrey continued, eyes twinkling. "Drawn by lot. No refusals." The lots were drawn from a silver bowl. Poirot found himself paired with Dr. Hart. Lady Valentina drew Count Volkoff and gave a theatrical shudder of delight. Daphne was paired with Goldsmith, to her visible disappointment. Sir Geoffrey declared himself referee and would remain at the villa. By 11 the pairs had scattered across the island like bright birds released from a cage. Poirot and Dr. Hart took the path that wound upward through terraced gardens toward the ruined temple on the northern cliff. For a long time neither spoke. Bees droned in the rosemary. Far below, the sea flung itself against the rocks in white fury. At last Dr. Hart said, "You are wondering why I asked to speak privately." "I am wondering many things, Doctor, but yes, that is one also." She stopped beneath the shade of a carob tree. "The emerald is not merely cursed," she said. "It is poisoned, literally. The setting contains a mechanism, very old, very clever, that can release a pinpoint of curare when the clasp is pressed in a certain way. Cleopatra used it for enemies who grew too admiring. Sir Geoffrey believes the mechanism rusted centuries ago. He is wrong. I tested it in Cairo. 1 scratch and death within 4 minutes. Poirot's eyes narrowed to green slits. "And you tell me this why? Because someone here knows, and intends to use it. I have seen the way they look at the stone, not greed, hunger, the hunger of a man who has decided to burn the world to keep warm." She reached into her pocket and produced a small glass vial containing a single black pearl. "This is the antidote. There is only enough for one person. If the worst happens, you must decide who lives." Before Poirot could answer, a scream echoed across the island. High, childish, terrified, Daphne Blair. They ran. They found her in the lemon grove, white-faced, pointing at the ground. Count Volkov lay sprawled among the silver leaves, eyes wide to the sky, a crimson stain spreading across his white shirt. Dead, quite dead. A single stab wound to the heart, delivered with surgical neatness. In his right hand he still clutched a torn scrap of parchment, one of the treasure hunt clues. Lady Valentina arrived moments later, cigarette dangling from blood-red lips. "Well," she said, exhaling smoke toward the corpse, "it seems the game has begun in earnest." Poirot knelt. The wound was narrow, almost delicate. "A stiletto, perhaps, or an ice-pick, something easily concealed." He gently pried the parchment from Volkov's stiffening fingers. Written in Sir Geoffrey's bold hand were the words, "The serpent devours its tail beneath the watchful eye of Tanit." Poirot looked up at the others gathering, their faces a gallery of shock, suspicion, and, in one case, he was almost sure, satisfaction. Far above them, gulls wheeled and screamed against the perfect sky. "The auction," Poirot said quietly, "has its first casualty. But I assure you, mesdames et messieurs, it will not be the last." He rose, brushing lemon leaves from his immaculate trousers. "Come, we must inform our host that his treasure hunt has become a manhunt." Chapter 4. Whispers in the Shadows. The heat of the afternoon pressed down like a hot palm. Count Volkov's body had been carried back to the villa on an improvised stretcher of doors and tablecloths. Sir Geoffrey, for once stripped of his booming joviality, stood in the marble hall staring at the sheeted figure as though it were an accusation. "I locked every gate," he said hoarsely. "The only boat is moored under guard. No one has left the island. The murderer is still among us." Poirot regarded him with calm, bright eyes. "Précisément, mon ami, and therefore the auction must continue." A gasp rippled through the little group. "Continue!" cried Daphne Blair, clutching Goldsmith's arm. "With a dead man in the house." "Especially with a dead man in the house," Poirot replied. "To cancel would be to hand victory to the assassin. He wishes panic, confusion, flight. We shall give him none of these things. We shall give him instead an audience." Sir Geoffrey drew a long breath, squared his shoulders, and became once more the master of San Serpente. "Very well. The auction will take place tonight as planned, but the vault will be guarded by my most trusted men, and every guest will remain in sight until the hammer falls." He turned to the major domo. Prepare the great hall, and have the Count laid in the ice-house. We shall observe the proprieties later." The guests dispersed like smoke. Poirot lingered. "Sir Geoffrey, a word." They stepped into the library, a cool cavern of cedar and vellum. Poirot closed the door. "The wound," he said without preamble, "was made by a blade no longer than my little finger. It entered between the 4th and 5th ribs, and pierced the heart with the precision of a surgeon. Your Count was killed by someone who knew exactly where to strike." Sir Geoffrey's face was grey beneath the tan. "You are saying one of my guests is a professional assassin. I am saying one of your guests has killed before, and will again, unless we prevent it." A soft knock. Dr. Hart entered, carrying her medical bag. "I have examined the body," she said. "Death instantaneous, no hesitation marks. Whoever did this was not afraid to look their victim in the eye." She hesitated, then added, "There was a note pinned inside the Count's waistcoat. I thought you should see it." She handed Poirot a folded scrap of paper. On it, in crude capitals, one down, "The Serpent claims its own." Sir Geoffrey swore under his breath. "Blackmail? Warning! Madness!" "All three, perhaps," said Poirot. "But notice the ink is fresh, the paper torn from the treasure hunt clues. The murderer improvises. That is useful." He tucked the note away. "Tonight, Docteur, you will sit beside me at the auction. I may have need of your special knowledge." She inclined her head and left as silently as she had come. At 9 o'clock the great hall blazed with light. Chandeliers of Venetian glass dripped fire. The auctioneer, a thin, nervous man flown in from Geneva, stood behind a velvet-draped podium. Armed guards in evening dress lined the walls. The guests took their places like actors entering for the final act. Lady Valentina, magnificent in black lace and diamonds, sat with her chin high, as though daring fate. Felix Goldsmith mopped his forehead continually with a silk handkerchief. Daphne Blair looked as though she might faint. Only Sir Geoffrey's iron grip on her elbow kept her upright. Dr. Hart sat beside Poirot, pale but composed. The lesser items came and went: a Fabergé egg, a Holbein miniature, a necklace once worn by Josephine Bonaparte. The bids rose and fell like waves. At last the auctioneer cleared his throat. "Lot 49, the Emerald of Cleopatra." The crystal casket was placed on the podium. The room seemed to hold its breath. The bidding began at £1,000,000. Goldsmith opened. Lady Valentina counted instantly. Daphne surprisingly joined in, her voice trembling but determined. Sir Geoffrey merely watched, smiling his Viking smile. The price climbed with dizzying speed. 2,000,000, 2.5, 3. Suddenly the lights went out. A woman screamed. Glass shattered. A single shot cracked like a whip. When the emergency lamps flared on moments later, the podium was empty. The Emerald of Cleopatra had vanished, and Sir Geoffrey Harrington lay sprawled across the front row, a neat black hole in the exact centre of his forehead. Dead, this time, before he hit the marble. For one heartbeat the room was utterly silent. Then chaos erupted. Poirot alone remained seated. He looked slowly around the circle of white faces, and his voice cut through the panic like a scalpel. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said quietly, "the serpent has struck twice. Now it is time for the mongoose." He rose, small and immaculate and terribly calm. "Lock every door. No one leaves this room. The auction is over. The inquest begins." Chapter 5. The Fatal Bid. The great hall had become a cage of crystal and candlelight. The guards, faces rigid with shock, stood with revolvers drawn, while the guests huddled together like survivors of a shipwreck. Blood, Sir Geoffrey's blood, spread in a dark mirror across the marble, reflecting the chandeliers in crimson shards. Poirot moved among them with the neat precision of a watchmaker. "Silence, if you please," he said, and somehow the screaming stopped. "We have two crimes now, committed within minutes of each other. The theft of the emerald and the murder of our host. They are connected, naturellement, but perhaps not in the way you imagine." He knelt beside Sir Geoffrey's body. The bullet had entered dead centre of the forehead. There was almost no blood on the face itself, only that had all run backwards into the golden beard. The eyes were wide open, fixed in an expression of mild surprise, as though death had arrived with an ungentlemanly joke. Poirot gently closed the lids. "Shot from in front," he murmured. "The murderer stood no more than 6 feet away, yet no one saw the weapon. Curious." Lady Valentina gave a brittle laugh. "Curious. The lights went out, the room was in darkness, and someone put a bullet through Geoffrey's brain. There is nothing curious about it, only barbaric." "Yet the emerald disappeared at the exact same moment," Poirot replied. "That is curious. That is theatrical. That is arranged." He turned to the auctioneer, who was being sick into a potted palm. "Monsieur, you were closest to the casket. Did you see or feel anything when the lights failed?" The man wiped his mouth. "Only a draught, as though someone rushed past me. Then the glass broke and the shot." Poirot examined the podium. The crystal lid of the casket lay in glittering fragments. The black silk cushion was empty. He picked up a sliver of crystal, held it to the light. Cut, not smashed from the inside. Someone opened the casket first, took the emerald, then shattered the lid to create confusion. The shot came after. Therefore the thief and the murderer are the same person, or accomplices working in exquisite harmony. Dr. Hart's voice came from the shadows near the door. Or the murder was meant to hide the theft, kill the owner, blame the chaos, escape with the stone. Possible, Poirot conceded, but then why shoot Sir Geoffrey in the front of the head, where every eye would see the direction of the bullet? No, no, this murder was intended to be seen. He straightened, clapping his hands once, sharp as a starter's pistol. Now, we shall reconstruct. Everyone return to the exact seat you occupied when the lights went out. Vite! They obeyed with the numb compliance of people in a nightmare. Poirot took Sir Geoffrey's chair, now horribly empty save for the blood. He looked around the circle. Lady Valentina, you were here, yes? Count Volkoff would have been beside you had he lived. Mr. Goldsmith, you sat to the left of Miss Blair. Dr. Hart beside me, and Sir Geoffrey directly in front. He paused. When the lights failed, what did each of you do? A babble of voices. I grabbed Daphne's hand. I reached for my cigarette case. I stood up. I smelled gunpowder. Poirot lifted a hand. One at a time, Lady Valentina. I remained seated, she said coldly. I am not a schoolgirl to shriek in the dark. Yet you wear perfume, madame. Jasmin et sang. Very distinctive. Did anyone smell it strongly during the darkness? No one answered. Poirot's eyes moved to Daphne Blair. The girl was shaking. Miss Blair. I think someone brushed past me. A silk sleeve, and then the shot. I thought it was part of the auction, like fireworks. Goldsmith cleared his throat. I dropped my catalogue. When I bent to retrieve it, I felt something under my shoe. A small object, metal. He reached into his pocket and produced a mother-of-pearl opera ticket, the kind used in theatres to summon ushers. On the back, in pencil, were scrawled the words, row a seat. 7 Poirot took it, frowning. Seat 7 was Sir Geoffrey's own chair. He looked up sharply. Who wrote this? Blank faces. At that moment a guard burst in, breathless. Monsieur Poirot! The vault has been opened. The huge safe inside is empty. But there is blood, fresh blood, on the floor. Poirot's eyes glittered. Then the serpent has crawled home to its nest. Come, we follow. They descended the marble stairs to the underground vault, a fortress of steel built into the living rock of the island. The door stood ajar. Inside, the great safe gaped like a violated mouth. On the floor lay a single object, the Emerald of Cleopatra. It rested on the black silk cushion, serene and deadly as ever. And smeared across its surface, still wet, was a perfect bloody thumbprint. Poirot stared at it for a long moment. "Tiens," he whispered, "the murderer returns the jewel and signs his work." He bent closer. "But this thumbprint, it is too perfect, too deliberate. It is, how do you say, un signature d'artiste." He straightened, and for the first time his voice held something almost like excitement. "Mes amis, we are not hunting an ordinary thief. We are hunting a madman who wishes to be caught, but only by someone clever enough to deserve the prize." He turned on his heel. "Lock this room. Touch nothing. Tomorrow morning, when the light is clear and the little grey cells are rested, Hercule Poirot will tell you who killed Sir Geoffrey Harrington, and why the Emerald of Cleopatra drinks blood." He paused at the door, looking back at the glittering green serpent in its nest of crimson. "And then," he said softly, "we shall see who is truly cursed." Chapter 6. Poirot's first observations. Dawn came pale and merciless over San Serpente. The sea lay flat as hammered silver. The sky was no wind, no birds, only the slow, relentless ticking of heat already gathering. Hercule Poirot had not slept. At 6 o'clock he walked alone to the ice-house, where the two bodies lay side by side on marble slabs. Count Volkoff, stiff in his bloodied linen, and Sir Geoffrey, majestic even in death, the bullet hole in his forehead now a small black star. Poirot studied them with the detached tenderness of a man admiring a difficult chess problem. "Two murders," he murmured, "committed by the same hand, yet speaking different languages. One whispers, one shouts. One is intimate, one is spectacle. Why?" He turned to the Sicilian policeman who had been left in charge. An anxious young man with a moustache almost, but not quite, as splendid as Poirot's own. "Serpente, the fingerprints on the emerald. You have taken photographs?" "Si, signore, and of every guest as you ordered." "Bene. Bring them to the library in 1 hour. Also the clothes worn by each person last evening. No exceptions." The young man saluted and fled, grateful to escape the presence of the dead. At 8 o'clock the remaining guests assembled in the library, hollow-eyed, dressed in borrowed black. Even Lady Valentina had abandoned colour. She looked strangely younger in mourning, like a wicked child playing widow. Poirot entered last, carrying a small leather case. He placed it on the table with ceremony and surveyed them. "Mesdames et messieurs, we have 24 hours before the yacht returns tomorrow noon. By then, I will deliver the murderer to justice. But first, clarity." He opened the case. Inside, on green baize, lay the Emerald of Cleopatra, gleaming like a captive star. A collective intake of breath. "Yes, it is beautiful," Poirot agreed. "Also, it is innocent. Jewels do not kill. People do." He lifted a photograph of the bloody thumbprint. "This mark upon the stone is not the careless signature of a thief in panic. Observe, the ridges are perfect, the pressure even. It was placed with care, almost with love. Only one substance allows such clarity. When blood is the ink, glycerin. Someone prepared this print in advance." Daphne Blair gave a small, frightened sound. Poirot continued. "Now, the murders themselves. Count Volkoff was stabbed with a narrow triangular blade, entering the heart from below. An Arabic technique. learned perhaps in the cafes of Cairo or the back streets of Tangier. The killer was shorter than the Count, or the Count was bending forward, perhaps to read the clue still clutched in his hand. Sir Geoffrey was shot with a .25 caliber automatic, a lady's weapon, or a gambler's. The bullet entered the Serpente recovered from the wall behind the chair, is of Belgian manufacture. Interesting, no? He let that settle. 2 weapons, 2 methods, 2 messages, yet one mind? Why? He took from his pocket the mother-of-pearl opera counter found by Goldsmith. This was dropped, or planted, beneath Mr. Goldsmith's shoe. Row A, seat 7, Sir Geoffrey's seat. Someone wished us to believe Sir Geoffrey himself arranged his own death. Absurd, but clever. Lady Valentina lit a cigarette with shaking fingers. You are enjoying this, aren't you, little man? Immensely, madame. The criminal mind is rarely so artistic. He turned suddenly to Dr. Hart. Doctor, you told me the emerald's clasp contains poison, yet no one has died of curare. Why? She met his gaze steadily. Because the mechanism was disarmed 3 nights ago. I did it myself. A murmur of shock. Poirot merely nodded. Expected. You are a woman of conscience, but someone else believed the poison still active. Someone who wished Sir Geoffrey to die slowly, publicly, clutching his throat while the serpent laughed. When that failed, they chose the bullet instead. He closed the case with a snap. Now I will ask each of you a simple question. Answer truthfully, and the innocent have nothing to fear. He began with Daphne Blair. Miss, last night when the lights went out, whose hand did you hold? The girl flushed crimson. I don't remember. Come. A young lady does not forget such things. She looked helplessly at Goldsmith, then away. It was Mr. Goldsmith's sleeve I caught, but he pulled away at once. Goldsmith started. I was searching for my dropped pencil. Poirot's eyes moved to Lady Valentina. And you, madam, remained perfectly still. Like a statue, she said mockingly. Yet your perfume is very strong. Someone should have smelled it if you moved even 1 step. She shrugged. Perhaps your famous nose is mistaken. Poirot smiled thinly and turned to the last person. Dr. Hart, when the lights failed, where were you? Reaching for my bag. I thought of the poison, feared an accident. Yet your bag remained on the floor beside your chair, untouched. For the first time the doctor's composure cracked. Poirot let the silence stretch until it was unbearable. Then softly, I have observed everything. The footprints in the blood, the missing button, the torn hem, the cigarette ash where no one smoked. I know who left the emerald in the vault. I know why the murderer returned it. He looked around the circle of strained faces. But one piece is still missing. Tonight, during dinner, I will stage a small reconstruction. The lights will fail again, exactly as they did last night. And this time, the murderer will betray himself. He bowed very correctly. Until then, mes amis, reflect. Confession is easier than exposure. He left them staring at the closed leather case where the serpent slept, waiting for night. Chapter 7. Alibis and Accusations. Dinner that evening was served in the small Moorish dining room rather than the great hall. No one had appetite, yet everyone came. To stay away would have looked like fear or guilt. A single candelabrum burned on the table. The electric lights had been disconnected by Poirot's order. Shadows leapt across the tiled walls like nervous conspirators. Poirot sat at the head, perfectly at ease, sipping a glass of Serpente's heavy red wine. The emerald, locked once more in its crystal casket, rested in the centre of the table like a silent guest. Conversation was brittle and sparse. Lady Valentina toyed with an olive, then crushed it suddenly between crimson nails. Felix Goldsmith drank steadily, eyes darting. Daphne Blair kept twisting her napkin into knots. Dr. Hart alone ate with calm precision, as though feeding a machine that must not be allowed to fail. At exactly 10 o'clock, Poirot rose. Mesdames et messieurs, the moment has come. We will now recreate the exact conditions of last night. You will take the same seats, the same wine will be poured, and in precisely 7 minutes, the candles will be extinguished for 30 seconds, no more. He signalled. 2 footmen carried in a second candelabrum and placed it beside the first. These candles, Poirot explained, have been specially prepared. They will burn for 7 minutes and then die together. When they do, you will remain perfectly still. You will not speak. You will not move. You will wait for the darkness to pass, exactly as you did when Sir Geoffrey died. A nervous laugh escaped Goldsmith. Poirot's eyes pinned him. You find death amusing, monsieur? Goldsmith swallowed the laugh and reached for his glass. The minutes crawled. At 3 minutes to the hour, Poirot lifted the crystal casket and set it directly in front of his own place. Last night, he said conversationally, someone crossed 6 feet of marble in total darkness, opened this casket, removed the emerald, smashed the lid, and returned to their seat, all without being detected. Tonight, we shall see if it is possible. Lady Valentina's voice was silk over steel. And if your murderer refuses to perform again? Then, madame, he will have signed his own confession by that refusal. The candles flickered lower. Poirot watched the flames with the concentration of a cat at a mouse hole. 30 seconds remained. 20. 10. The candles guttered, sank, and went out. Darkness, absolute and velvet, swallowed the room. For 5 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then a chair scraped. A soft, deliberate, a rustle of silk, the faintest click of the crystal lid, a sharp intake of breath, and then, unmistakably, the tiny metallic snap of a pocket lighter. A flame flared, small, blue, steady, held 6 inches above the open casket. In its glow, Poirot saw a gloved hand reaching for the emerald. He moved like lightning. His own hand shot out, closed around a wrist. The lighter clattered to the table. "Les lumières!" he cried. The footman, waiting outside, flung the doors wide. Electric light flooded the room. Caught in the sudden glare, Felix Goldsmith stood half-risen from his chair. One arm still outstretched. Poirot's fingers clamped around his wrist like a steel cuff. In Goldsmith's other hand glinted a tiny .25 automatic, the twin of the weapon that had killed Sir Geoffrey. For a moment, no one moved. Then Goldsmith gave a strange, almost apologetic smile. "Damn you, Poirot," he said softly. "I was so careful." He let the pistol fall. It rang on the marble like a dropped coin. Lady Valentina began to laugh, high and hysterical. Daphne buried her face in her hands. Dr. Hart simply closed her eyes. Poirot released the wrist and stepped back. "Monsieur Goldsmith, you will oblige me by remaining exactly where you are." Goldsmith sank into his chair as though his bones had turned to water. "It's over, isn't it?" he said. There was relief in his voice. "Almost," Poirot replied. "One last performance remains." He turned to the others. "You believed you were watching a murder reconstructed. In fact, you witnessed a confession. Mr. Goldsmith could not resist the emerald a second time. Greed is a patient master, but never patient enough." Goldsmith looked up, eyes suddenly sharp again. "You think it was greed? You understand nothing, Poirot. Nothing." He laughed once, bitterly. "Then enlighten us," Poirot invited. Goldsmith glanced at the emerald, and something like reverence crossed his face. "That stone destroyed my father in 9. He bid everything he owned, borrowed more, lost it all when the night the emerald vanished from the Cairo Museum. He put a bullet in his own head on the steps of Shepherd's Hotel. I was 8 years old." His voice was perfectly steady. "I have spent 30 years waiting for the Serpent to surface again. When Harrington cabled that he had it, I knew what any son would do. I came to take back what was owed." Poirot's gaze never wavered, and Count Volkov recognized me in the lemon grove. He was in Cairo that winter. He saw my father beg on his knees. Volkov thought it amusing to blackmail me for a share of the stone. I gave him the only share he deserved. He touched the place over his heart with ironic tenderness. Sir Geoffrey was simpler. He trusted me. I had sold him half his collection. I knew the vault combination, the wiring of the lights, the exact moment the candles would die tonight. Child's play. Poirot inclined his head. Child's play, executed with the precision of a master. But you made one mistake, monsieur. Goldsmith lifted an eyebrow. You returned the emerald to the vault with a theatrical thumbprint in blood. You wished to be thought mad or mystical. In truth, you are merely sentimental. You wanted the world to know the serpent had claimed its last victim. Your father avenged. The account closed. Goldsmith closed his eyes. Yes, he said simply, I wanted them to know. Silence filled the room like deep water. Poirot picked up the emerald, cradling it in both hands. Then know this also, monsieur. Vengeance is a serpent that devours its tail forever. It does not end with the last bite. It begins again. He turned to the footman. Take him to the billiard room and guard him. Tomorrow the yacht will bring the police. Goldsmith rose without resistance. As he passed Poirot, he paused. Tell me one thing, Poirot. How long have you known? From the moment I saw the thumbprint, Poirot answered. Only a man in love with his own legend would sign it in blood. Goldsmith gave a small, tired smile. Touché. He walked out between the footmen, head high, a ruined man strangely at peace. The others sat as though turned to stone. Poirot placed the emerald back in its casket and closed the lid with gentle finality. The case, he said quietly, is closed. But even as he spoke, his eyes flicked once, almost imperceptibly, toward Dr. Evelyn Hart. She met his gaze for a fraction of a second, and in that instant something passed between them, too swift for anyone else to catch. Then she looked away, and the moment was gone. Outside, the Mediterranean night breathed warm and waited. Chapter 8. The hidden motive, the house slept uneasily. Goldsmith had been locked in the billiard room under double guard. The emerald rested once more in the vault, this time with Poirot himself holding the only key. The clocks ticked toward 3 in the morning, and the island seemed to hold its breath. Poirot did not sleep. He sat in the moon-flooded library in his dressing gown of plum-coloured silk, a small glass of tisane beside him, staring at the leather-bound auction catalogue. Every few minutes he turned a page, but his eyes were not reading. At 3:30 the door opened without a knock. Dr. Evelyn Hart entered, barefoot, wearing a dark robe. Her hair was loose, black against the white of her throat. She carried no light. The moon was enough. Poirot did not look up. I wondered how long your conscience would permit you to wait, Docteur. She closed the door and leaned against it. Goldsmith did not kill Sir Geoffrey, she said quietly. No, Poirot agreed. He killed Count Volkov, that is certain. He also stole the emerald twice, and he fully intended to kill Sir Geoffrey. But the bullet that ended your patient's life came from another hand entirely. She crossed the room and sat opposite him, How long have you known? From the moment the candles went out tonight. Goldsmith moved, yes, but he moved too late. The shot that killed Sir Geoffrey was fired during the first 3 seconds of darkness. Goldsmith was still fumbling for his lighter at the 7th second. I felt the air displace when he stood. The murderer had already sat down again. Dr. Hart's fingers tightened on the arms of the chair. Then why let everyone believe because the real murderer still had one act to perform? And for that act, she needed to feel safe. He lifted his eyes at last. They were very green in the moonlight. You, Dr. Hart? She did not flinch. Yes, she said. I killed him. The confession hung between them like incense. Poirot waited. She drew a long breath. Geoffrey Harrington was my father. Even Poirot's composure flickered. Your father. My mother was his mistress in Alexandria 28 years ago. He paid for my education, my medical training, everything, on condition I never acknowledged him. I was the secret he kept polished and hidden, like one of his statues. When I qualified, he brought me here as his private physician, so he could parade his charity in front of his friends without ever saying my name with pride. Her voice was perfectly steady, but the words cut like scalpels. 3 months ago, he told me he was changing his will. The emerald was to be the centerpiece of a new museum bearing his name. Everything else, every penny would go to that museum. I would receive nothing, not even the acknowledgement of blood. She looked at her hands. I have spent my life healing people who despised me for existing. When he laughed and said, "You'll be provided for, Evelyn, don't worry your pretty head," something inside me snapped. Poirot spoke gently. And the poison in the emerald? A myth I revived. I knew he would test the mechanism himself one day, to prove the curse nonsense. I replaced the ancient curare with harmless dye. I wanted him to think he had been poisoned, to feel terror for 4 minutes before I gave him the antidote and told him the truth. I wanted to see him beg. She gave a small, wondering laugh. But he never touched the clasp. He was too careful. So I chose the bullet instead. Poirot leaned forward. The .25 automatic. His own. He kept it in the drawer of the auction podium, loaded, because he said millionaires make enemies. I palmed it when I leaned forward to examine the catalogue. When the lights died, I was already standing. 1 step, the darkness, the barrel against his forehead. 1 second, back to my chair. No one felt me move because I never sat down. She met Poirot's gaze without defiance now, only exhaustion. Goldsmith's theatrics gave me the perfect screen. Everyone saw what they expected, the obsessed son exacting revenge. I even helped you believe it. Poirot sighed. You are very clever, Docteur. Almost as clever as Hercule Poirot. But you made one error. He reached into his pocket and produced the thin gold chain she always wore. At its end hung a tiny enamelled serpent, the exact miniature of the emerald. You lost this in the dark. It caught on Sir Geoffrey's cuff button when you leaned across him. I found it an hour ago. She touched her throat, surprised to find it bare. And now, she asked, now you will write your confession. Then you will drink the real curare you keep hidden in your medical bag, the dose you prepared for him. It is quick, painless, and entirely your choice. Tomorrow, the Italian police will find one murderer dead by his own hand, and one tragic suicide note from a devoted physician overwhelmed by grief. He placed a sheet of heavy cream paper before her and uncapped his fountain pen. Write, mon enfant. Write that you could not live with the knowledge that you had taken your father's life. The world will pity you, and Sir Geoffrey's secret will die with us both. She stared at him for a long moment. "Why give me this mercy?" "Because," Poirot said softly, "Hercule Poirot, too, has known what it is to be the unacknowledged child." She took the pen. The scratching of nib on paper was the only sound in the moonlit room. When she finished, she signed with a steady hand, folded the letter, and laid it beside the emerald casket. Then she stood. "Goodbye, Monsieur Poirot." "Adieu, Docteur." She walked out of the library without looking back. 20 minutes later, Poirot found her in the garden, seated beneath the jasmine, already beyond help. He closed her eyes with the same tenderness he had shown Sir Geoffrey, and arranged the empty vial in her limp hand. Above them, the first pale streak of dawn touched the sky. Poirot looked up at it and spoke to the morning. "3 deaths for 1 green stone," he said. "May it rest now." He returned to the villa, locked the confession in his case, and finally allowed himself to sleep. The serpent had devoured its tail. The circle was complete. Chapter 9. A Night of Revelations. The yacht was sighted at 11 the next morning, a white arrow cutting the molten sea. By noon the Italian police had come aboard. A captain with a face like old leather, 2 sergeants who sweated through their uniforms, and a photographer who clicked his tongue at every corpse as though they were badly arranged furniture. Poirot received them on the terrace with perfect courtesy, offering chilled vermouth and a concise, tragic narrative. "Signori, you will find everything in order. Mr. Felix Goldsmith, overcome by an obsession of 30 years, murdered Count Nikolai Volkov in the Lemon Grove and attempted to steal the famous emerald. Sir Geoffrey Harrington was shot during the confusion of the auction by the same hand. Dr. Evelyn Hart, devoted physician and secretly the natural daughter of Sir Geoffrey, discovering the truth too late, took her own life in a fit of remorse. Here are the weapons, the fingerprints, the signed confessions. The case, as you see, is closed." The captain read the documents, compared the signatures, examined the bodies. Everything fitted with the neatness of a watchmaker's drawer. "Perfetto, Monsieur Poirot," he said at last, almost disappointed. "A tragedy, but clear. We will take the prisoner and the bodies. The emerald remains with the estate, see?" "See," Poirot agreed, "though I suspect the stone will spend the rest of its days in a museum vault, guarded by men who do not believe in curses." The captain laughed, shrugged, and gave the order to load the launch. Only one detail remained. While the others were occupied below, Poirot slipped away to the ice-house. Goldsmith sat on a crate, wrists cuffed, staring at the sheeted forms of Sir Geoffrey and Dr. Hart. "You let her die," he said without greeting. "I gave her the only gift left," Poirot replied, "a death with dignity. You would have dragged her through courts, newspapers, disgrace, that I could not permit." Goldsmith considered this. "And me. You will hang, monsieur, but you will hang as the sole murderer of 2 men, not 3. Your father's name will be spoken with pity, not scorn. That, too, is a gift." Goldsmith gave a cracked laugh. "You are a strange little man, Poirot. Order and method, monsieur, even in mercy." They looked at each other across the cold room. Goldsmith spoke first. "The emerald. May I see it one last time?" Poirot hesitated, then drew the crystal casket from beneath his coat. He opened it. The stone blazed even in the dim light, green fire licking at its own heart. Goldsmith stared, transfixed. "It's smaller than I remembered," he whispered. "All those deaths for something I could cover with one hand." He reached out, then stopped. "May I touch it?" "Poirot?" Poirot considered. Then he lifted the emerald and placed it in Goldsmith's cuffed palms. For a long moment the man simply held it, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on his cheeks. "It's cold," he said, surprised. "Always," Poirot answered. "Beauty is always cold." Goldsmith closed his fist gently around the stone, then opened it again and offered it back. "Tell the museum to lock it away forever," he said. "Some serpents should never see daylight." Poirot took the emerald, returned it to its casket, and locked it with a small, decisive click. "Adieu, monsieur." Goldsmith nodded once, almost a bow. The launch's engine coughed into life outside. Poirot left him there, sitting between the dead, strangely at peace. On the terrace, Lady Valentina and Daphne Blair waited, veiled in black, trunks already aboard. Lady Valentina extended a gloved hand. "You have been insufferably clever, Monsieur Poirot. I shall loathe you forever." "Madame, I am desolate." She laughed suddenly, the old husky laugh. "Liar! You adore being loathed by beautiful women." Daphne approached more shyly. I don't know what to say. It's all been so dreadful." "Say nothing, mademoiselle. Go home. Marry a dull, kind man who breeds spaniels. Forget San Serpente." She managed a wobbly smile. "I think I shall." They descended to the jetty. The launch pulled away, white wake widening like a wound closing. Poirot remained on the terrace until the yacht was a speck, then nothing. He turned back to the villa one last time. In the great hall, the auctioneer's hammer still lay where it had fallen. Poirot picked it up, weighed it, set it neatly on the podium. Then he walked down the marble steps to the waiting motorboat that would take him to the mainland. As the island dwindled behind him, he opened the crystal casket once more. The emerald was gone. In its place lay a single black pearl, the one Dr. Hart had once shown him as antidote, and a folded slip of paper in her neat doctor's handwriting. "Monsieur Poirot, you were right. Some serpents should never see daylight. I took the real stone when I left the library last night. By the time you read this, it will be at the bottom of the Mediterranean, 3,000 meters down, where no one will ever bid for it again. Let the world believe the curse won. Forgive me." E.H. Poirot read the note twice. Then he tore it into fragments and let them flutter into the wake like white butterflies. He closed the empty casket, locked it, and slipped it into his pocket. The black pearl he kept, rolling it between finger and thumb as the boat cut towards Sicily. Far behind, San Serpente shimmered in the heat, beautiful, empty, and finally harmless. Poirot smiled, a small, sad, satisfied smile. "The serpent," he murmured to the wind, "has devoured its tail for the last time." He leaned back against the rail, closed his eyes, and allowed the sun to warm his face all the way home. Chapter 10. The Second Strike. 2 weeks later, Grand Hotel des Alpes, St. Moritz snow fell in. Thick, silent flakes drifted past the tall windows of the reading room. The fire crackled. Outside, the lake lay frozen and white as porcelain. Hercule Poirot sat alone at a small table by the window, a cup of thick hot chocolate untouched before him. On the green baize in front of him rested the crystal casket. Empty, of course, yet he opened it every morning, as though expecting the emerald to have crept back in the night. A shadow fell across the table. "Still mourning your serpent, Poirot?" The voice was low, amused and impossible. Poirot did not start. He merely closed the casket with deliberate care and looked up. Dr. Evelyn Hart stood before him, wrapped in sable, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes very bright and very much alive. "You are supposed to be dead, docteur," he observed mildly. "I was," she answered, "for 8 hours. A little-known South American alkaloid. almost indistinguishable from curare, but with a perfect antidote if administered within 12. I injected the antidote into my own thigh the moment I reached the garden. The rest was theatre. She sat without invitation. You gave me the stage, the motive, the method, even the confession paper. I simply used them. Poirot studied her with fascination, and something close to admiration. And the emerald. She opened her gloved hand. The serpent lay coiled in her palm, green fire licking at the snowlight. It belongs to no one now. I kept my promise. No museum, no collector, no more blood. Tonight it goes back to the sea, this time from a place no diver will ever reach. Poirot leaned forward. Why come to me? To boast? To thank you, she said simply, and to warn you. She placed a small envelope on the table. Open it after I leave. She rose. Poirot's voice stopped her. You could have vanished cleanly. Why risk this meeting? She looked down at him for a long moment. Because you are the only man alive who understood why I had to kill my father, and still let me go. I wanted you to know the story did not end in suicide. I wanted you to know I am free. She smiled, the first real smile he had ever seen from her. Also, I wished to see whether the great Hercule Poirot would try to stop me. And if I did, you won't. She turned and walked away between the potted palms. A tall, dark figure against the white storm outside. Poirot waited until the door closed behind her. Then he opened the envelope. Inside was a single black pearl and a brief note in her clear hand. The second strike is not murder. It is mercy. Keep the pearl. Remember me when you are tempted to judge too harshly. E.H. Poirot sat motionless for a long time, rolling the black pearl across his knuckles like a magician. At last he slipped it into his waistcoat pocket beside his watch. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing footprints, erasing everything. He lifted the empty casket, turned it once in the firelight, and spoke to the silent room. Bon voyage, docteur. May the sea be kinder to you than men ever were. Then he rang for a waiter, ordered a fresh chocolate, and settled back to watch the storm. The game, for once, had ended not in order restored, but order had surrendered. And Hercule Poirot, for the first time in his long career, discovered that the sensation was not entirely unpleasant. Chapter 11. Unravelling the Web Venice, late February 1936 Carnival. The city floated in a silver mist, half real, half dream. Masks drifted through the cowls like bright fish. Music spilled from every palazzo. The canals reflected 1,000 lanterns and no faces at all. Hercule Poirot had come for the quiet of the off-season. Instead, he found a note slipped beneath the door of his suite at the Daniele. Midnight. Ponte dei Sospiri. Come alone. The Serpente is not finished with you. No signature. Only a tiny green scale pressed into the sealing wax. At 5 minutes to 12, he stood on the Bridge of Sighs, coat collar high, Homburg pulled low, the black pearl warm against his heart. A gondola detached itself from the shadows and glided beneath the bridge. The gondolier wore the traditional straw hat and a white boater mask. The single passenger was cloaked in black domino, face hidden behind a silver volto. The gondola stopped directly under the enclosed bridge. A gloved hand beckoned. Poirot descended the steps and stepped aboard without a word. They moved off into the narrow Rio, the only sound the soft slap of water against stone. After 10 minutes, the gondola turned into a hidden canal and nosed against a private water gate. A door opened, candlelight spilled out. Poirot followed the cloaked figure up a narrow stair into a small, exquisite room overlooking the Grand Canal. Masks of every kind lined the walls, Columbine weeping, Pulcinella grinning, Plague Doctor staring. The figure removed the silver mask. Dr. Evelyn Hart. She was thinner, sun-browned, hair cropped short beneath a man's fedora. She looked like a beautiful boy playing at conspiracy. "I said goodbye once," Poirot remarked. "You make a habit of returning from the grave." "I needed you to see the last act with your own eyes," she replied. "Then I will vanish for good." She crossed to a lacquered cabinet and took out the Emerald of Cleopatra. Even in the candlelight it burned. "I lied about dropping it into the sea," she said. "I couldn't. Not yet." She set the stone on a small ebony table between them. "I brought you here to offer you a choice." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "The emerald can still kill," she continued, "not by poison, that mechanism is broken forever, but by desire. I have spent 3 months watching it work. Collectors, princes, thieves, they smell it from continents away. 2 men have already died trying to buy it from me in Tangier. A woman in Athens took her own life when I refused her price." She leaned forward. "So, 2 paths. 1, I give the stone to you. You return it to whatever museum or government claims it. The murders begin again, slowly, politely, in boardrooms and back alleys, but they begin. The serpent wakes. 2, tonight, together we drop it from the Rialto into the deepest channel at high tide. No diver, no magnet, no miracle will ever bring it back. The serpent sleeps forever." She sat back. "Your decision, Monsieur Poirot." For a long minute, only the candles spoke, spitting softly. Poirot removed his gloves with deliberate care. "You ask me to choose between justice and mercy," he said at last. "It is an old dilemma. But tonight the little grey cells are unusually clear." He reached into his overcoat and produced the empty crystal casket. "I have carried this since St. Moritz. An absurd sentiment, perhaps. Yet it reminded me every day that some stories should end without a final chapter." He opened the casket and placed it on the table beside the emerald. "Put it in," he said simply. She stared at him, eyes suddenly bright with unshed tears. "You are certain?" "I'm certain that Hercule Poirot has spent a lifetime putting things in their proper places. Tonight I will make an exception." She lifted the emerald, hesitated one last heartbeat, then laid it gently on the black silk. The serpent coiled inside the crystal as though it had never left. Poirot closed the lid. The tiny lock clicked shut. Together they descended to the waiting gondola. No words now. The city was quieting. Carnival masks drifted homeward through the mist. They passed beneath the Rialto at the turn of the tide. The water ran black and swift. Poirot stood. The casket weighed almost nothing in his hands. He looked once at Evelyn Hart. She nodded. He let it fall. There was no splash, only a soft swallowed sound, as though the canal itself sighed in relief. The emerald vanished into the dark water of Venice, taking every curse, every death, every unpaid debt with it. For a moment they remained side by side on the swaying gondola, watching the ripples fade. Then Evelyn leaned over and kissed Poirot once, lightly, on the cheek. "Thank you, little father," she whispered. Before he could answer, she stepped onto the fondamenta and melted into the mist. The gondolier poled away without waiting for instructions. When Poirot looked back, the narrow Calais was empty. Only the faint scent of jasmine lingered in the cold night air. He touched his cheek where her lips had been, and smiled a small, wondering smile curved beneath the famous moustache. "Bon voyage, ma fille," he said to the sleeping city. "This time, truly." Somewhere far below, in the ancient silt of the lagoon, the serpent finally closed its eyes. Chapter 12. The Final Twist and Resolution. London, April 1936. Claridge's Suite 3-12. The English spring came in pale and apologetic, as though embarrassed by its own mildness. Hercule Poirot sat at his breakfast table with the curtains drawn back, letting the weak sunlight fall across the Times and a letter bearing an Egyptian postage stamp. He slit the envelope with his silver fruit knife. Inside was a single sheet of heavy papyrus-coloured paper and a small object wrapped in tissue. The note was brief, written in the same clear doctor's hand he now knew by heart. Monsieur mon père spirituel, by the time you read this, I will be in Aswan, boarding the old dahabeah that will take me up the Nile, to the place where the world ends and the stars begin. I lied one last time. The emerald you and I dropped from the Rialto was not the emerald of Cleopatra. It was a perfect copy, flawless copy, made for me in Cairo 20 years ago by the same jeweller who once restored the original for the Khedive. I switched them the night I died on San Serpente. The real stone has been hidden in my medical bag ever since. I could not let even you decide the fate of something that has drunk so much blood. Tonight, under the new moon, I will row alone to the centre of Lake Nasser, where the old temples sleep beneath the water. There I will weight the serpent with gold and let it sink to join its first mistress. This time no hand, living or dead, will ever raise it again. Keep the black pearl. When you hold it, think not of curses, but of a woman who finally chose to heal instead of harm. You taught me that justice need not always wear handcuffs. Je vous embrasse. Evelyn Poirot unfolded the tissue. Inside lay the tiny enamelled serpent pendant she had worn at her throat, the one that had caught on Sir Geoffrey's cuff the night of the murder. The chain was newly repaired. He sat very still for a long time, turning the little serpent over and over between his fingers. Then he rose, crossed to the writing desk, and took from a locked drawer the empty crystal casket that had travelled with him since Venice. He opened it. Nestled on the black silk, exactly where the false emerald had once rested, was the real emerald of Cleopatra. It blazed up at him with ancient patient fire. Poirot allowed himself the smallest, most satisfied smile of his career. "Eh bien, ma petite," he murmured, "you thought to outfox Hercule Poirot. But the little grey cells, they do not sleep." He closed the casket, locked it, and slipped it into the pocket of his dressing gown. At 11 o'clock that evening, in a quiet street behind the British Museum, a small van waited. 2 trusted porters carried a single anonymous crate into the staff entrance. At 11:30, the curator of Egyptian antiquities, roused from his bed by an urgent telephone call from a gentleman who wishes to remain anonymous, unlocked the great bronze doors of the new wing. He found on the plinth prepared for the Emerald of Cleopatra the crystal casket. Inside, the serpent lay coiled as though it had never left Egypt. A plain white card rested against the silk. For the world, from one who loved it too much and not enough. No signature. The curator, a cautious man, telephoned Scotland Yard at once. By morning, the emerald was insured, photographed, catalogued, and locked behind armoured glass under the gaze of 3 guards and 4 silent cameras. The newspapers screamed miracles and curses and lost treasures found. Only one small Belgian detective read the accounts over breakfast the next day, buttered his toast with perfect precision, and permitted himself a final, private chuckle. "Thus," said Hercule Poirot to his empty suite, "the serpent returns to its cage, the daughter finds peace on the Nile, and Hercule Poirot, he keeps the last secret after all. He touched the tiny enamelled serpent that now hung on his watch chain beside the black pearl. Then he rang for more coffee, opened his appointment book, and turned, serene and impeccable, to the next impossible case. Outside, London went about its ordinary business, unaware that somewhere beneath its pavements and sentries, a circle had finally, perfectly closed. And the little grey cells, for once, were entirely, blissfully at rest.